Let's get right into it. Number 10. Cleaning the mouse ball. Remember when your mouse stopped working and you had to perform surgery on it? You'd flip it over, twist that little ring, and out would pop this rubber ball that looked like a tiny bowling ball. The fun part was scraping off the horrifying gunk that collected inside. It was like archaeology, but instead of finding dinosaur bones, you'd find these perfect little rolls of lint and dirt. These grime sausages would form around the little rollers inside the mouse, and they were oddly satisfying to remove, like peeling dried glue off your hands. You had to do this ritual every few weeks, or your mouse cursor would start jumping around the screen like it was having a seizure. Some people got so good at this they could clean their mouse without even looking. They'd just pop it open during meetings and start scraping away. But here's the really gross part. That gunk was actually a mix of dust, dead skin cells, and whatever else was on your desk. So basically, you were collecting a museum of your own filth. Now with optical and laser mice, this skill is as dead as the skin cells we used to scrape out. Kids today will never know the satisfaction of performing mouse surgery and extracting those perfect little grime rolls. Number 9. Rewinding tapes with a pencil. Remember when your biggest life hack was sticking a pencil through a cassette tape? Perfectly centering that number 2 pencil in the tape spool was like performing surgery. Except instead of saving lives, you were saving those AA batteries in your Walkman. You'd spin that pencil like some kind of audio DJ. Some people would do it so fast the tape would make this high-pitched whining sound, but spin too fast and your favorite mixtape turns into cassette tape spaghetti. Then you'd have to play surgeon with your pinky finger, trying to get the tape back in. Number 8. The knocker-upper. Imagine it's 1890, and you need to wake up for work tomorrow. No alarm clock, no smartphone, and your rooster just got eaten by a fox, so you'd hire a knocker-upper. And no, that's not some Victorian-era euphemism. These were actual people whose job was to wake others up by shooting peas at their windows or poking them with really long sticks. Think of them as human alarm clocks, except instead of hitting snooze, you might accidentally hit them with a chamber pot. The knocker-upper would walk around town with a long bamboo stick, sometimes up to 20 feet long. They would use this stick to tap on people's second-floor windows until they saw movement inside. Some knocker-uppers got creative and used pea shooters instead. Imagine trying to sleep in and getting pelted with dried peas at 5 a.m., but the knocker-uppers themselves needed to be woken up. Most knocker-uppers were either people who already had to wake up early, or they were insomniacs who figured they might as well make money from their inability to sleep. Some knocker-uppers even had their own knocker-uppers. It was like a weird game of wake-up tag. The profession lasted until the 1970s in some parts of England. We had people walking around poking windows with sticks while we had already landed on the moon. Number 7. Switchboard operator memory. Switchboard operators had the power to connect or disconnect every single conversation in their town. They weren't just connecting calls, they were basically human routers with superpowered memories. They had to memorize hundreds, sometimes thousands of phone numbers. Not just numbers either. They had to know who was where, and who wasn't speaking to who. Get one connection wrong, and suddenly Mrs. Johnson is hearing Mr. Smith's secret conversation with his mistress instead of reaching her daughter. They had to be lightning fast. They sat in front of a wall of holes and wires. A call comes in, and they've got seconds to physically plug the right wire into the right hole. Switchboard operators knew everything. They were like the town's unofficial therapists, emergency responders, and Gossip Central all rolled into one. Need to find the doctor at 3 a.m.? The operator knew where he was having dinner. Looking for your teenager who's late coming home? The operator probably heard them making plans earlier. It was like having Facebook, Google, and 911 all in one person. If an operator didn't like you, they could just never connect your calls. It was like having the power to put someone in social media jail, except in real life. Number 6. Punch card programming. Imagine having to write a Facebook post by punching holes in a piece of cardboard. That's what computer programming used to be like. Before keyboards and mice, programmers had to use these special cards with holes in them to talk to computers. Each card could hold approximately 80 characters of code. That's less than a tweet. One wrong punch and your entire program could crash. Imagine spending hours punching hundreds of cards, then accidentally dropping them. Now you've got to put them back in order, one by one, like a jigsaw puzzle designed to make you quit. Some programmers would write numbers on the sides of their card stack with a marker. Then when they inevitably dropped them, they could sort them by looking at the line they drew. The best part is, if you wanted to fix a bug, you couldn't just hit backspace. You had to punch an entirely new card and physically replace the old one. Some programmers got so good at this they could read the programs directly from the holes, like some kind of weird tech fortune teller reading binary tea leaves. Universities used to have entire rooms dedicated to storing these cards. Students would carry their programs around in boxes, praying it didn't rain. because if those cards got wet, you just lost your entire thesis. Number 5. Log driver's balancing act. Imagine your job is to surf down a raging river while standing on a giant log. No safety gear, no training wheels, just you and a piece of tree playing a deadly game of don't fall in. Back in the 1800s, this was an actual job. They called these guys log drivers, and they were basically the extreme sports athletes of their time. Their job was to transport freshly cut logs downstream to the sawmills. They had to ride on the logs to guide them. One wrong step and you're not just falling into water. You're falling between massive logs that could crush you in seconds. These guys had to be part acrobat, part lumberjack, and part crazy. They'd hop from log to log like they were playing the world's most dangerous game of hopscotch. The really skilled ones could even make the logs roll under their feet to move around. It was called burling, and it was basically river breakdancing. They also had to break up log jams, massive pileups of timber that could block entire rivers. Breaking up a log jam meant climbing onto an unstable pile of logs with a pike pole. A single misstep, and the whole thing could collapse. Tons of timber tumbling like nature's deadliest game of Jenga. Today, we use trucks and trains to move timber. Way less exciting, but way less deadly. Number 4. Elevator operator finesse. Elevator operators weren't just button pushers in fancy uniforms. These folks were basically performing a high-stakes ballet with a death machine. Old elevators didn't have automatic stopping systems. Operators had to manually control this giant brass lever that looked like something from a steampunk nightmare. Moving this lever controlled both speed and direction. The real art was stopping the elevator exactly level with the floor, too high, and passengers had to step down, too low, and people would trip. These operators had to develop an almost supernatural feel for their specific elevator. Each one had its own personality quirks, like a moody horse that might decide to stop a few inches off just to mess with you. The best operators could tell how heavy their load was just by the sound of the motor. They'd adjust their stopping technique based on weight, speed, and even the weather, because humidity could affect how the cables behaved. Some operators got so good they could stop within a quarter inch of perfect level while reading a newspaper. They also had to be a combination of security guard, tour guide, and therapist. They knew everyone's names, office gossip, and probably a few secrets they took to their graves. Today's automatic elevators are safer and more efficient, but they've got all the personality of a kitchen appliance. Number 3. Shorthand. Imagine you're a journalist in the 1950s, racing to catch someone's dying words. You can't whip out your iPhone and hit record. You've got approximately 30 seconds to capture what might be the most important words this person will ever say. That's where shorthand comes in. It was like texting abbreviations on steroids. These journalists could write at the speed of normal speech, which is approximately 180 words per minute. They used a system of squiggles and symbols that looked like alien hieroglyphics. Think about how we use LOL or BRB in texts. Now imagine an entire language built like that, but instead of just a few dozen abbreviations, shorthand had thousands of symbols. Each symbol could represent entire words or common phrases. It was so efficient that court reporters could capture every single word in a heated argument without missing a beat. Some of history's most famous last words only exist because someone knew shorthand, but as the last generation of shorthand writers dies out, we're losing the ability to read their notes. There are countless historical documents, court records, and final confessions written in shorthand that we might never be able to decode. Number 2. Setting type. Imagine spending your entire workday playing with tiny metal letters, except these letters are trying to kill you. That was the life of a typesetter back in the day. These guys were basically the original graphic designers, but instead of clicking around in Microsoft Word, they had to physically place each letter by hand. And when I say letters, I mean actual metal pieces shaped like letters. Think of it like playing with Lego, but every brick is made of lead and wants you dead. These typesetters would arrange thousands of these toxic little letters every day to print books and newspapers. It was incredibly precise work too. One wrong letter, and suddenly you're telling people to eat your vegetables and die instead of diet. And these workers were literally being poisoned to death by the lead. It would seep into their bodies from handling all those letters. Your hands would shake so bad you couldn't even hold your coffee, and that's just the start. Many typesetters ended up with permanent nerve damage, tremors, and some even went insane from the exposure of lead. Those old typesetters were literally dying for their art. Every book printed back then came with a hidden cost, the shortened lives of the people who put it together. letter by deadly letter. Number 1. Human computer. The job title computer used to belong to actual people. These people calculated rocket trajectories and bridge load capacities with just pencil, paper, and their brains. One wrong decimal point could cause a disaster. NASA employed rooms full of these human computers. A single math problem could take days to solve. Most of these computers were women. At the time, companies thought women would be more patient with the tedious work. Plus, they could pay them less. These human computers had to be perfect. They could multiply 5-digit numbers in their head. One famous human computer, Katherine Johnson, checked the calculations for John Glenn's orbit around Earth. Glenn refused to fly until Johnson verified the numbers by hand. An astronaut's life literally depended on her math skills. All that work can now be done by a cheap calculator in seconds. Your phone has more computing power than all of NASA's human computers combined. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.